And it's my pleasure to welcome to the Today's Leader podcast, the podcast for the leaders and the entrepreneurs of today. It's my pleasure to welcome Denis Gianoutsos. Denis, welcome to the podcast.
Tony, thanks for having me here on the podcast.
It's a fellow podcast host. I'm getting a number of them lately. I've had Martin Moore from the No Bullshit Leaders podcast, and it's just exciting talking with other podcast hosts. But before we get into that, Denis, tell us the Denis Gianoutsos story.
Well, the story is that I grew up here in New Zealand. Mum and Dad, well, Dad's from Greece, and he moved here 61 years ago, met Mum, and they've been in the coffee industry for 61 years. So I grew up in the coffee industry. Okay. And at the age of 7, here I was at the shop after school holidays, weekends, and I think the big story out of that is that's where I learnt my work ethic, and learnt a lot from that. Then I actually really wanted to be in the police, but then my ex-wife now at the time said to me, it's either the police or me, you choose. I chose her. Damn. And then 10 years later, we divorced. So the thing here is that that lesson for me there, and that's that little bit that I just shared, was you've got to follow your passion and your dreams and whatever that is.
Yeah.
So I went into the IT industry because that started with P as well, being a programmer, and did that for about 4 years, didn't like it, and really was in leadership positions ever since I was at school, primary school, and really wanted to be a leader. So I continued to sort of follow that passion and did really well, went up through the ranks within the organisation, the corporate world. But about 20 years ago, I was approached by the HR organisation globally, who said, because it was a large global IT company starting from the US, saying that, look, we're about to start a coaching practice globally. We hear what you do outside of this organisation privately. Would you like to be part of it part-time? Yep. Okay, I'd love to do that. Became an international award-winning practice, and we did that. And then about a year later, I had to say goodbye to my daytime job as an executive and go into the HR space to really develop leaders around the world, because I don't think, Tony, there's enough good leaders in the world today, and even back then and 20 years ago. So I think it was about getting in there and following my passion to coach them, train them, facilitate them and their teams to be the best that they can be, to really lead people going forward in whatever they needed to do. And so I did that, which was pretty cool. So that's a little bit about the background and the story and how I got into this sort of space.
Yeah, you've got a lot of experience. We initially met through the John Maxwell team. Of course, you're another certified John Maxwell coach. And the big thing I want to start with, I suppose, is your podcast, the Leading Change podcast. Now, from what I can see on Listen Notes, you rank in the top 2% of podcasts. So congratulations, well done. I think you're at about just over the 150s in terms of episodes. So what brought about the podcast, Denis? What drove you to look at helping improve leadership through a podcast?
Yeah, interesting little story here. Well, I think it's interesting, and what it actually turned out to be is about 8 years ago, when I'm out there facilitating events, my voice started to change. It started to get quite hoarse or raspy, or as the specialists called it, eerie.
Yeah.
And what we found, in a long story short, is they found a tumour on my left vocal cord. And so every year the voice got worse and worse and worse, and I had people coming up to me every day, 2 or 3 people asking me, am I sick? No, I've just got a raspy voice. And if you think about the likes of the Tony Robbins kind of speaker, his voice is quite raspy, it was worse than that. And I found it quite embarrassing and quite hard to get my voice out there. And it sort of held me back. So when they found the tumour, about 4 years ago, I had it removed. And they had to remove it because, A, it was growing too big and it was going to block the windpipe, so it would suffocate me. And the second thing is as well, the quality of life and getting that voice out there and so forth was really important.
Yeah.
When they removed it, it came back as being benign, non-cancerous. And I was like, whoa, I think I've been given a second chance here in my life. So I really want to go out there and do something I wanted to do. Because I think a lot of people in life don't go and do certain things in life. They keep putting that decision off. And they don't want to go and do something because of the fear of making a decision, may work, may not work, and here I am in the corporate world, traveling the world,
Yeah.
Some years with 40 weeks in the year, traveling a lot around the world, developing leaders and executives and their teams. And I thought, I'm having so much fun here. I don't really want to leave there and go and start my own business. And so when I went through that journey of the voice and so forth, I thought, okay, I've been given a second chance in life. Come on, mate, you need to make this decision, get on and start your business, which I did, just on 3 years ago. I just started that business, which is called Leading Change Partners. And then as a result of that, when we went into lockdown about a year ago, or just over a year ago, I thought, I'm not going to sit around and do nothing here, because I had a whole lot of gigs cancelled. So I decided to launch my podcast called Leadership is Changing. And there's a friend that you and I know, Joanna from Athens, Greece, who turned around and said to me, Deniss, your podcast, before you had the voice of silence because of what you were going through, but now it's the voice of impact. And I was just like, oh, that just gave me shivers on the back of my spine when I talk about it. But it really meant that I wanted to get my voice out there to be heard. I wanted to help other leaders have their voice being heard as I interview them. But then it was also teaching leaders and entrepreneurs and people about leadership and about change and so forth like that, to help their own voices lift, so then they could help themselves, their organizations and their teams as well. So that's how that journey of that podcast started.
Excellent. And you've got a real focus around change, leading change partners. The podcast is called Leadership is Changing. If you haven't subscribed to it, please do yourself a favor and jump on over and have a listen. There's some amazing episodes in there. I particularly like the one with Paul Martinelli, one of the founding people out of the John Maxwell team. That was Paul is always an absolute inspiration. But leading change is a common theme within your story, Deniss. Why is that such a focus for yourself? And so give us a little bit of an insight as to why change and the aspect of leading change is so important.
Well, I think one of the constant things that we have in life today is change. And if you think about the likes of large companies that didn't change over time, the likes of Kodak, right, didn't go ahead with a digital solution, and their business went down after that. And even though the board of directors actually did have a digital solution on the table, and they decided not to go ahead with it. Yeah. So that's one side. But I think the other side is that because change is so constant, that a lot of leaders don't know what to do or how to handle it. So there's two things here, Tony. One is they've got to go through change themselves, and how do they handle that? And the second thing is then they need to lead their teams and their organizations through change, and lead the customers as well and their stakeholders. And so I think that it's more about how do we prepare them for that to get underway. And I'll give you a great example. There was an exec that I was working one-on-one with, and as we're going into lockdown, his comment to me was, oh, well, I'm just going to wait for it to blow over. And I'm like, in hindsight now, he would have been waiting a long time. But at the time, I said to him, no, you won't. And he goes, what? I went, no, you're a senior exec. You need to stand up now, and you need to lead this change. You need to, because it is a change we're going through. Yeah. It's not the one that we want, but it's in front of us right now. And your team and your organization needs you now more than ever. And so you're going to have to step up and get on with it. And he was like, whoa, good chat. And to his credit, he did go ahead and do that. And so it's that passion of actually helping leaders lead people through change. It's about helping them understand what it means and helping them through things for sure. And it can only do that. We can only do that if we as leaders show up with the right attitude and that discipline and focus and consistency to help other people move forward too.
Absolutely. Change is just one of those things that most people really struggle with in working with any sort of a personality profile tool. And I use the DISC profile with my clients. Just about everyone has got some reluctance to change in there somewhere. And it's one of those really challenging aspects around leadership. How do I embrace change? How do I accept change? And often it starts with that acceptance in my mind. There's only a very select few amount of people that are constantly looking for evolution and change within their own lives. So I can certainly understand why it is so important. So how do you use that to work with clients? You've given us an example. So how do you what sort of tools do you use to help them work through that change leadership aspect?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to we are always on as people, as individuals, as leaders today, because technology is making things go faster and faster and faster.
Yeah.
So one thing I definitely do is either be in a one-on-one coaching situation, one to me being the one and their team coaching them, or it's a facilitation of an event or some training, is that I actually get them to stop. They need to take some time out to stop and step back and think about things, because a lot of leaders go from email to email, meeting to meeting, and they don't actually change quick enough. So then they run that risk of being left behind. And so what the important thing here is to stop and step back and take stock and think about things and give yourself some of that space to do that, and then now be deliberate around some of these decisions we need to make to move forward. And so what I use is I use the facilitation and I use the coaching side of things, but even within my facilitation, it's a lot of it's coaching to actually challenge them. And Tony, I will work with teams, and there's the elephant in the room. They won't say certain things or they won't do certain things. And so what I'll do is actually put the cat amongst the pigeons and let it blow up, but then bring it back and manage it and move it forward, because they need to talk about it. And this is the thing that's holding them back. And for a lot of us, we don't want change. I don't know if you've ever heard this quote, but it's dangerous words whereby people say, but we've always done it this way. And those words are quite dangerous for a lot of organizations. And I think it's really important that we do think about things and then decide what we want to do going forward. But there might be some things that we want to leave alone, which are fine. And that's no problem at all either. But, at least we can actually observe and understand where things are at any one time to be able to do it. And then the other thing I do is actually get them to acknowledge it, as you say, or accept it. It's actually understanding where they are at any one time, and then what they need to do to move forward, which is really good. Because if they stand still, if you and I stand still and go, okay, I'm not doing anything, then we're actually going backwards, because everything else around us is moving forward and changing so quick that we will get left behind. And it's really quite interesting to watch that happen. It's
an absolute constant at the moment, change, and COVID has really accelerated that in so many ways, shapes and forms. And it's interesting you talked about that's the way we do things, or there's nothing worse for a person who's come into an organization, the fresh set of eyes that are looking and questioning and asking questions about process or systems or people, and they get that as a response. No, that's the way we do it. And nothing kills energy and enthusiasm more than that particular statement. So,
yeah, and then what happens then? So then what does that new person do with that? So for a lot of people, they sort of get pushed back, and then then actually what happens is like as if they've been bitten by a zombie, and now they become part of the actual whole story or situation as well, and they don't do anything about it because it's too hard, or this is how we've always done it. And so it's like my message to people is no, stand up. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Now stand up and push to get these things done, because the organization deserves really good leadership.
We just get into the status quo, don't we? And there's so many stats out there, Deniss, around change management and processes in relation to when organizations go through a change management process, and most of them never succeed to the full extent that they are expected to succeed. And that's because one of the real opportunities there within any sort of change management process is for the leaders to embrace and be the champions of it. And if a leader hasn't got that within them, it's pretty odds on that the change is going to fail, unfortunately. So who's inspired you in your leadership journey? So, because I'm hearing there's various components, you've got a real focus on helping leaders identify change within themselves, embrace that. So where did that come from? Who's inspired you?
So, well, first of all, my parents, because of what they did in the coffee industry as leaders and that, so forth, and they definitely did. But the other one is my grandfather, so my dad's father. So Dad comes from a little island in Greece below Corfu, so it's in between Italy and Greece. And this little island is only 7 k's long, untouched. You know, in the wintertime might be 28 people on the island, but then in the summertime it swells to about 120. So it's really quite nice. But years ago, when Dad was growing up there was quite a large number of people and families there growing up, and a lot of those kids moved on to the mainland and so forth. But my grandfather was the president on that island for about 28 years. And I've got his name. I've been named same name as him, and then I've also have got his nickname. And I've also my dad and his siblings turn around and go, "There's Dad again." It's like as if I'm like him again.
Yeah.
The way I say things, the way I walk, everything. But I've only spent about 9 months in my whole life with my grandfather. You know, so once was 6 months when I was a 5-year-old kid, and the other time was 3 months when I was 21 years of age. And that's the only time I've spent with my grandfather. But I learned a lot from him. But my dad and my uncles and aunties have shared a lot about him and that. And he was a kind of guy, as a leader, who didn't like the status quo. And he would lead, and he would go to the mainland and fight for the people. He would fight, and he was very much into business, very much into moving forward, but he was also very much about the people as well and wanting to take everyone forward and advancement and so forth. And so I think a lot of that's come from that too. And then the other one would be the mentors, the people I've had around me who have helped me grow. They are no slugs, if I can put it that way. They're not people who sit around. They're high performers who are out there doing things. And you know, you mentioned Paul Martinelli as an example. John Max was another one, and there's a few others as well. But you know, just being around them and learning from them and taking things that they've done to help me has been really quite cool to go through that journey.
Yeah, we learn from so many people, but it's the ones that really the ones that challenge us and stretch us that are the ones that really create that influence right throughout our journey. And I know I sit back in awe at some of the people I've met and become associated with through the John Maxwell team. And I certainly wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if it wasn't for meeting and working with some of those people. So leadership is changing. Okay, I'm going to throw that one in. Leadership is changing. So, but what are some of the traits that you would see in great leaders in the past, and are they the same traits needed in today's leaders?
Yeah, good question. I think that a lot of leaders of the old, if I can put it, in the past and today, there are various common traits that still come through. It's just a little bit different in the sense that it could be faster. It could be more of a digital sense because there's a lot of technology in that and so forth. But I think one of the traits is a great communicator / connector. They can connect with people a lot. You know, there's too many people who can communicate, but they think they're communicating, but a lot of people go, I don't get what they're saying. And it's the connector whereby they understand their audience, but they make things relatable to the audience, whether it be one-on-one or many people, it doesn't matter. I think if they can connect really well, that's the kind of person people go like, wow, I really understand and I really follow this person. And that's what's been really cool to see. So definitely great communicator / connector.
Yeah.
The other one, well, there's a few other things too. One is that they are always disciplined, focused, but also consistent. And that consistency is the big thing that you see with a lot of them, is that they are disciplined. Now, whether someone get up at 5 a.m. in the morning, it doesn't matter what time, whatever they do, it's what they do with their day and how disciplined and focused and consistent they are is quite cool. And when you think about consistency, even the messaging is consistent.
Yeah.
Even their approach is consistent. Even if they make decisions and the way they make decisions and the kind of decisions they make is consistent as well. So I think that's really quite important.
Yep.
I think another one would be having a vision, planning, and then the last piece is around executing. It's the execution that's really quite cool. It doesn't mean that they have to be the executor. It means that they may have people around them that do the execution piece, but they have to get on with things and make it happen. There's a technical term that I use, and I don't know if you want me to use it, but it's just like get shit done, right? They just get on with it. I think it's really, really quite important for sure.
Yeah.
And as I work with leaders around the world over the last 30 years, what I've noticed is those who are high performers are very fit.
Yeah. Okay.
They are really fit. You don't see many high-performing leaders who are overweight. They are always out. They'll find time, but they must be so busy. Yeah, they are, but they'll find the time to exercise, eat well, drink water, do the things that they need to do, because that's where they have huge energy as well that actually helps them do what they need to do. And so that seems to be the common traits that I see of leaders from the past and even today, although there are some things that are totally different from when we were in the past, right? So here's an example is we very much had the command and control type scenarios in the past, where today it's a lot more collaborative.
Yeah.
And if leaders aren't listening to people and helping people's voices be heard, then they're not going to do very well.
Yeah, that you've raised a couple of really good points there. Listening is just one of my favourite skills to help leaders with, because it's unfortunately a skill that not a lot of leaders do incredibly well, but the ability to listen to their team and to ask the questions needed to actually get the communication going. Consistency is key to a leader. There's nothing worse for a team, Deniss, and you would have seen this with leaders that are up and down. One day they're on top of the world because something's good's happened. Next day someone's reprimanded or given them some feedback, and they're down in the dumps, which means the whole team is down in the dumps. You know, I talk about a leader being on show every day, and that's so true when it comes to consistency of leadership. And I liked your little analogy around communication. And what's that saying John says? One of the biggest problems with communication is the assumption that it's happened. And we see that so many times. So many leaders say, but I've told them what to do. Well, you may have told them what to do, but did they understand what needed to be done? And so some of those traits are absolutely vital in leadership, no matter what period of time. But yeah, the ability to change, the ability to embrace the new in respect of things like technology is really critical for leaders of today. So now, Deniss, our journeys are never simple. They're never on a upwards trajectory. We're always going to have those troughs that overwhelm us. We're always going to get those days where we just think we've been hit in the head with a fish or something. So tell me about some of those troughs that have appeared in your journey and how you work through some of those. It's like, tell me about your relationship with failure as well while we're working through that. So our troughs and your relationship with failure.
Yeah, I think, we're all going to be tested many times in our career, and curveballs will be thrown at us. It's just how resilient we are to be able to cope with it. And, I've just done an episode that's called Coping with the Unexpected, and it's how to do it. And I think, with Olympic Games that we've been watching of late and so forth, it's actually seeing an athlete fall over on the 1,500-metre race in the heat, getting up and then running and going for it and actually coming through and winning the actual heat. And then on that same day, going through and winning 11 hours later, the 5,000-metre gold medal, even though they fell very heavily during the heat 11 hours earlier. It's just amazing. So I think, the troughs and that, the thing that's really helped me, even through my time with the tumour and then other things that I go through, it always comes back to my why. What's my purpose? And if I can understand my why and purpose, that's the thing that's going to lift me. That's the thing that's going to really help me, because I can easily get, be in pity city and feel sorry for myself and go in the corner and sit there with a blanket and, and watch Netflix all day because I'm, not very happy. And I think COVID and pandemics, that's actually done that to some people to a certain extent. But then you would have seen people actually then come out of that because, Tony, you and I, we're in countries where we've been very fortunate. We've been in and out of sort of lockdowns, but majority of the time, we haven't been in the lockdowns over the last year and a half. And then you see other countries who have been in lockdown for a long, long time, right? And so they're going through a trough, and it's about what we do with that. That's what's really going to be important. Now, a lot of this is easy for you and I to say, not always easy to do, right? So I always go back to the thing is, what's your why or your purpose? Yeah. Because I think that's the thing that actually helps you move forward. And understanding why am I doing this, or what can I do to move forward which I think is really, really important for sure. So that's some of the troughs. And I think the other thing too about being disciplined, focused, and consistent is the things that are going to help you come out of those kind of troughs and keep going. Even though at times it's hard to see and sometimes hard to do. But, if we're going to what you talked about, the failure side of thing, I think if you stop, as I said before, and take stock of where you are, and then you can plan, and then you can execute and move forward, then you can actually sort of bounce out of it. Will it work straight away? Maybe, maybe not. But I think the thing is you've got to have some sort of plan to understand what you're wanting to do. And if you can prepare beforehand, great. Then you're sort of anticipating things, and you can move and adjust depending on what's going on. But if you haven't, that's okay. Push through. But then think about where you want to go, what you're wanting to do, and then, as we've used these words, pivot, adapt, and so forth, then do that and then move through it for sure. So, that's just some thoughts that I had there around that space.
Excellent. Oh, pardon me. One of the interesting things about failure, Deniss, is that I've just come back from the Northern Territory, and my wife and I ran the Australian Outback Marathon, and my wife made it, and I took the option to complete the run at 28.64 kilometres instead of the 42.2. And I was really quite flat about that because I had a bit of an injury with my hip that was just not being helped by the outback tracks and the corrugation. So I think fundamentally I made the right decision, but I couldn't help but feeling flat, especially when seeing all the people that were running the marathon complete and finish and all of those things. So, and once again, it's just that reset, isn't it? So I've looked at it as I faltered. I haven't failed because I'm going to go back next year and the course won't defeat me. But it was a real personal thing at the moment for me because, my wife's got bragging rights at the moment. She completed and I didn't. And she's been a wonderful support for me during this time, but by the same token, it's quite challenging. But it is really about resetting. And now I've got my focus for the next 3 months on how I want to work through the injury and get running again. And then we'll go from there. So it's about learning. So understanding why I failed, why the injury occurred, and moving on from there. Now, you mentioned the balance and the fitness of leaders, and this is something that many leaders struggle with, the constant, or where do they get their energy sources from? So we talk about the energy of a leader, and energy is infectious, and energy is needed to maintain enthusiasm with teams. Where does your energy come from? And I know part of that question is going to be about your why as well, but I'm intrigued. I'm always excited to hear about from leaders, how do they maintain those energy levels? And I guess also, what do you do on your downtimes?
Okay, so good question around the energy space, because I think what a lot of leaders is that, well, no one wants to go and work for what I call a knuckle dragger, somebody who's down, the shoulders are drooped, and they're just, no one wants to work for that person. Someone wants to work with somebody that's full of energy, that has a lot of energy. But there's the other side too. Not someone who's out there so much energy that it's not real or authentic. Yeah. Right? It has to be real and authentic as well. Yeah. I think a lot of the energy comes from the 6 inches between our ears, our attitude. And I think going back to your story before about, finishing at the 28K mark and so forth, at the end of the day, change happens, and for some of it we can't control, but it's acknowledging that something has happened. But the thing that we can control is two things: our attitude and the way we react to it, and number two is where we're going next with it. And I think even if you think about people in the Olympic Games, right? Imagine what somebody's like 1/10 of a second, and they've got fourth and they've missed out on the medal. Yeah. After 4 years or 8 years worth of training and working really hard, and what do? And I think that energy comes from being that positive side of things, but getting out there and bringing it to whatever it is and doing your best. And I think it comes down to the passion. If you've got passion, that's great. And I think that's really, really important for a lot of us, is to have that passion in what we do. Yeah. And if you don't have that passion in something you're doing, then I'm going to ask the question, which is it really something you should be doing? Or is there something else that you're more passionate about and that you wanted to go ahead and do? Because I don't know about you, Tony. It's just like people saying to me, wow, you're nearly 180 episodes. How do you do it? Well, I love it so much. I feel like I'm a kid in a candy store. I can't get enough of it. But then when I look at it, it's not work. It's passion. It's the energy, and that's where it comes from. And I think that's what I just love it. And I love seeing people get insights, and I love seeing people make a shift for themselves and go to another level and do really well based on something that we may be working on and so forth. There's nothing more sweet than that, and I love it. And I think that's where a lot of that energy comes from for me.
Yeah.
However, you do need to sort of help yourself. And I think that for a lot of leaders, we're always on, as I said, and you're saying about, the downtime and so forth. You've got to take some downtime. You have to have that downtime to reset, recharge your batteries and come back, and so then you can give your best rather than flatlining all the time because you're tired and so forth. And if you take some time out, that's great. I mean, recently I took 4 days out, and I'm not near my phone, not near this, and all that kind of stuff. It's interesting. But that came back after those 4 days, and the energy levels were just way up there. And I needed to do that, and we all do. But it's just what we do. And everyone's different in the way of actually recharging. Some people love cooking, so they're active relaxers, versus others who just need to sleep a lot and so forth. So sometimes I actually will have a 9 or 10 hours sleep.
Yeah.
And it just helps me a lot. But I think the next biggest thing would be water. And if we can drink 3 to 5 liters of water a day, and that's a lot of water, then that's really going to help us a lot for sure. Keeps us hydrated, flushes the toxins out, really does help our energy. And I think it's great.
Yeah, energy is just absolutely vital. It was interesting after the marathon, Dennis. We did some major walks around some of the amazing features of Uluru and Katajuta and Kings Canyon, for example, out there, and they were good, challenging hikes. And you suddenly realise carrying 2 litres of water in a backpack, for example, how important that water and the hydration absolutely is. Now, Deniss, you've been a co-author in a book, and you're currently working through one on your own. Did you want to share a little bit about what you're writing about?
There's a couple of things I'm looking at in writing. One in particular is around the podcast, around that actual topic, Leadership is Changing. And so looking at doing some stuff around that space. And then the other one, there's actually several books I've got in mind, and you just can't take on too much, otherwise you're spinning too many plates and you run the risk of not achieving anything. So a lot of it is around leadership is changing and equipping leaders around that space and understanding what that means and what they can do with it going forward. And then another one's around in relation to how you can probably lead a bigger game. So how we are limited in our thinking, and so how we can actually do some bigger things. And because it's actually quite interesting to work with people and understand, and they're going like, oh, I don't know if I can achieve this, and next minute they do a whole lot of stuff and they achieve way more, and you go like, they go, oh, that was good. I'm like, okay, so were you limited in your thinking? And I think a lot of it is we get in the way of our own thinking, and we go through this thing called self-doubt, and we start questioning ourselves, and I think we have to learn to get out of our own way and move forward. So we'll see where that all goes, Tony. I think it's some really cool things, and I've got a few other things I'm about to launch as well in relation to some online stuff as well. So can't wait for it all to come out, and can't wait for it to happen. But it's all good, and it's people asking for it because they're wanting it more, and they're wanting to know what to do. And when people ask you 2 or 3 times around a certain topic, I've got to do something around this space.
Absolutely. Leaders or readers, Deniss, what are you currently reading?
Well, I just finished a book called Who, Not How. Now, it is actually related more for entrepreneurs, but I think it's actually very good for leaders as well. And it's by a guy called Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And so Dan teaches that sort of model, who, not how. It's about, for a lot of people who think about, oh, how am I going to get this done, or how am I going to get that down, where they should be actually thinking about, who can I get to do this work? And if you can get people, find out the right people to get on and do with it, that frees you up to get on with other things you can get on with. Then your energy is probably going to be higher, your passion's going to be higher, and you get other people to do some stuff. I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, I can do my accounts and I can do my GST and things like that, but doesn't light my fire, to be honest.
Yeah.
But then there's others who love doing that, so why don't I get them to do that kind of thing too? And it's like the podcast, right? I don't do the production. I get somebody else to come and do the production. And so they thoroughly enjoy that, which allows me to spend more time one-on-one with people, working with them or groups, and that's where I'm good at. And so it tends to free up. So that's a really quite a cool book.
Who, not how.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
And there's probably some real relevance there in building your own teams, isn't it? That you want to have people of complementary skill sets, and you want people on board that are going to align with, I suppose, the overall vision of what the organisation is, but to have a very separate skill set, because I do see too many solopreneurs trying to do it all. And, I've got a really good friend in the digital marketing space, and he will always sit down and talk to me about, the concept of how much capacity do you currently have within your business. And a lot of people feel capacity. And when we talk about capacity, it's our skill set capacity. So how much capacity do you have as a leadership coach, as a leadership trainer and a facilitator? And many people will fill that capacity by doing their social media or doing those other things that they're not really great at, let's face it. And whereas they should be looking to fill their own capacity, doing what it is that they love doing, and getting those people around them that can do what is needed to keep the organisation running. So Deniss, what's the book that has had the biggest impact on you?
I think it has to be Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
That's had the biggest impact on me, in the sense of, most people think it's all about money. It's not. It's all about mindset and a whole lot of other stuff as well. And that's been a big one for me. Definitely that. And then I think that the book's the book. It's what you do with it that's what's really important, and actually taking some of that stuff and implementing it. And so I used to teach masterminds, or do take masterminds on that book, and help people through it. And really quite cool to see people getting different things from the book. So, even right down to networking, the power of networking and so forth. And I think it's a wonderful book.
And it's just one of those other books. As soon as you mention it, my immediate thought goes to Paul Martinelli, because I did one of his deep dives into the book, the Mastermind Series, and going through it with an absolute expert and one who knows that book inside and out. And, Paul proudly shows the very first copy that he ever had of that book, and how it's all being held together by like rubber bands and whatnot. It really does help you understand the disciplines required, for example, the chapter on persistence, for example. I think when we did it, if I remember rightly, we actually started with the preface, and then we started with like chapter 9, persistence. And that sort of blew me away, because it wasn't like you start at the beginning and work your way through the book. We started at persistence, which I found absolutely incredible. But it's only when you can work with a master, as I'd call Paul in that space, that you can truly understand the reasoning behind that. So many people would just read the book.
Yeah, and that's how I met Paul, was actually about 5 years before the John Maxwell stuff, right? So then I'm founder of the John Maxwell team and so forth, but he and I know each other for 5 years before that, and and with working with that around that book in particular, and some other things. And so you're right, he is a master in that space, but he's actually not just taken the book as theory and then taught others about it. He's actually gone and done it and used it in his own businesses, in his own life. And that's where you see leaders who actually, there are those leaders who talk about things a lot. They talk about it, but actually at the end of the day, there's others who are the role models who actually do something about it. And Tony, a lot of us have nowadays this microscope on us, who are looking, people are watching us as leaders today, what we do. So one thing to read a book, something totally different again to do something with it, is really quite interesting. Absolutely.
What's the vision for you going forward, Deniss?
Oh, look, I've had enough, and I'm just probably going to go sit in the corner and do nothing else, And I don't think it's going to be me either. I'm a kind of guy that I don't even see myself retiring, to be honest. in the future, a long way down the track. But I think the future for me, well, the vision is to actually take things to another level, help as many leaders as I can, entrepreneurs as I can. Looking at launching a couple more brands soon, so wanting to do that,
Stay tuned,
which is very excited. Yep, absolutely. So, there's lots of things I'm wanting to do, and it's just to actually making sure I've got the right people around me, making sure we've got the right things in place, but then not having that hold me back. Because there's so many people that I've got to meet, and I think the podcast has been a big lesson for me in relation to that. People are wanting it to be perfect in whatever they're wanting to do in life, whether it's being a leader or whatever. It's never going to be perfect.
Yeah.
And you've just got to go, and then you can tweak it and see how you go. My artwork for some of the podcasts was okay for a while, and then I changed things up as I learned things and did things. And so you're always going to learn. It's actually it's what you do with those lessons is really going to be important. So I think that's probably the big thing for me is launching some new things going forward too.
Excellent. So out of everything that you've accomplished, what are you most proud of?
I think there's actually two things. One would be the actual transition from the large corporate role into entrepreneurship. Yep. Even though I grew up with parents who were entrepreneurs the whole time and so forth, actually doing that transition is different because not everyone can handle it. They got the peaks and troughs. It's a totally different mindset, right? It's actually that saying that's out there, that quote, it's actually getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, I think. And so it's been that transition. And then the second one would have to be, of late, would be the podcast and taking something from nothing and then launching it, as you know, Tony, and then going from there. It's just a wonderful process and journey.
One of the things that I found with the Today's Leader podcast, and as it's grown and evolved, because I kicked off the podcast way back in 2014 without any sort of clear vision or strategy. It was just something that I thought would be good to do. And then as the strategy got narrowed and focused, and one of the biggest, it's still a really selfish thing for me because every week now, or, I'll have 2 to 3 interviews with people like yourself, global leaders, people that are making an impact. And it's almost like my own little self-development program as I work through it, because I'm hearing new ideas, new ways of thinking. Some I embrace and think, my God, why didn't I think of that? Others I'm sort of thinking, okay, I can understand where that's coming from. But it's just one of those things that I just love doing, talking with leaders like yourself. And that's one of the greatest joys I get out of it. And then, just recently, especially for the Today's Leader podcast, we have been growing at a phenomenal rate. And I put that down to the fact of some of the quality people that have been on the podcast. And I just, once again, so it's not just me that's getting some great value out of it, it's others. And I'm sure you feel the same way. Yeah,
absolutely. And I just got to congratulate you for what you've done. I mean, that's nearly 8 years worth of, or 7 years worth of actual providing this and doing this as something, you don't get paid for doing this, but, it's actually helping you, but also helping your brand, but also getting people to share things, which is fantastic. And you just got to say to people like yourself, well done, and good on you for doing it. Most people give up after episode 7 of the podcast. And so, doing this on a regular basis, I think it's something really special. And so well done on what you do.
Yeah, I read that the average length of a podcast is about less than 10 episodes. So you're absolutely right. People start it and think they've got visions of grandeur and they want it to be an immediate success. And unfortunately, podcasting doesn't necessarily work that way. It's a bit of a long haul.
Well, nor does leadership. I mean, nor do most things in life. Most people think, ta-da, I'm here, I'm a leader now. Where is all the... And it doesn't work that way. You can't just take a red pill, blue pill, and go, ta-da, I'm a leader. It takes work. And same thing with podcasting, same thing with anything else we do in life.
Absolutely.
It does take work.
So is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you, Deniss?
I don't think so. I think we've covered off really, really, really cool stuff. And I think that I'm looking forward to having you on as a guest on my podcast.
Oh, look, yeah, absolutely. I'm stoked that you're allowing me on your podcast, Deniss. So
come on, it's good, man. I think it's going to be really awesome to talk about leadership is changing for sure. And so it's really good. I think that the the thing that I would say to you and your listeners is that, a lot of what we're talking about today it's they've heard some things on this episode. I always go, so what? What does it mean to you? Well, what are you going to do with it? Because even if you take one thing that we talked about today, just one, that could be life-changing to you, your team, your organization.
Yeah.
That's what's going to be really important.
Excellent, and a great point. So, Deniss, if people listening to this want to connect with you, how can they do that?
Well, check out the podcast, Leadership is Changing, definitely. That's available on all platforms. Two other things, website, leadingchangepartners.com. And, of course, the email, Deniss, that's with one N, Deniss at leadingchangepartners.com.
Excellent. Deniss, it's been a pleasure having you on the Today's Leader podcast. Thank you so much for investing in today's leaders.
Thank you, Tony.